Order in my court. The judge's gavel didn't just tap. It cracked through the air like a gunshot, freezing every soul in the room. Just a heartbeat ago, a mistress draped in designer silk had done something absolutely mental. She'd kicked the soon-to-be ex-wife right there in front of the bench, laughing as if she owned the place. And the millionaire husband? He just sat there with a smug grin, as if his fancy lawyers had already sealed the deal. But here's what he didn't have a clue about. He didn't know that the stern, cold-eyed judge on that bench was the woman's father, and the old man had just seen enough. This wasn't just some divorce proceeding. This was about to turn into a reckoning. So stick around, because you're not just watching a courtroom drama. You're about to witness an execution of a whole different kind. Before the courtroom, before the headlines, before her name was spoken in whispers, she was just a woman who believed in doing the right thing. Her name was Elena, and once upon a time she was the kind of person people leaned on. Not loud, not flashy, just steady. The type who showed up early, stayed late, and never made a fuss about it. She believed that loyalty mattered, that love meant effort, that if you stayed patient long enough, things would work themselves out. She had dreams, sure. Real ones. A career she was building step by step. Friends who believed in her. A life that felt hers. But when she met him, she made a choice that felt right at the time. She chose partnership over spotlight. She chose support over center stage. And she never complained. Elena was warm in a quiet way. The kind of warmth you notice when it is gone. She remembered birthdays. She listened without checking her phone. She believed that kindness was not weakness. Even when the world tried to convince her otherwise. People liked her because she was real. No fake smiles. No performative confidence. Just honesty. When his business started to take off, she was there. When nights got long and stress crept in, she stayed calm. She told herself this was temporary. That success came with pressure. That love meant standing your ground even when things got uncomfortable. She did not chase attention. She did not need validation from strangers. She believed that respect inside the home mattered more than applause outside it. That belief cost her more than she ever imagined. Because the woman she used to be trusted easily. She gave fully. She assumed that effort would be met with effort, and loyalty would be returned in kind. The audience would care about her for one simple reason. She did everything right. She did not betray. She did not manipulate. She did not cross lines. She simply loved the wrong man and underestimated how fast power can change someone when money starts talking louder than values. And that version of Elena, the one who believed love was enough, had no idea she was already being replaced in a life she helped build. What she lost next was not just a marriage. It was the illusion that being good always protects you. There was a time when everything felt simple. Not perfect. Just safe. They met before the money, before the titles, before his name carried weight in rooms where decisions were made. Back then he was just ambitious, not untouchable. Driven but still human. He talked about ideas with excitement instead of entitlement, and she listened like those ideas mattered. Because to her they did. Their relationship grew in quiet moments. Late-night conversations on a worn couch. Coffee going cold because neither wanted to end the talk. Plans scribbled on napkins that felt bigger than the tables they sat at. There was laughter, the real kind, the kind that catches you off guard and leaves your stomach sore. Trust came easily. He shared his fears with her. The fear of failing. The fear of not being enough. She never laughed at those fears. She believed in him when believing was still a risk. When no one else was watching, she was already in his corner, steady and sure. When he asked her to marry him, it was not flashy. No crowd. No performance. Just sincerity. Just two people promising to choose each other when life got complicated. And she meant it. Marriage at first felt like partnership in the truest sense. Decisions were made together. Wins were celebrated together. Losses were softened by shared silence. When he doubted himself, she reminded him who he was. When stress followed him home, she absorbed it without complaint. She trusted him completely. Not because she was naive, but because he had earned it. He showed up. He kept his word. He made her feel seen in ways that mattered. Love at that stage did not feel fragile. It felt solid, reliable, almost unbreakable. Friends would look at them and say they were lucky, low-key perfect. The kind of couple people rooted for without realizing it. She believed that love was not about grand gestures, but about consistency. About choosing each other on ordinary days. That belief shaped everything she gave. She adjusted her life around his goals without resentment. She stood back when he needed space to grow. She told herself that sacrifice was part of building something real. And for a while she was right. Love still felt safe because nothing had tested it yet. Power had not entered the room. Money had not started speaking over emotions. Success had not rewritten the rules. She did not know that the foundation she trusted so deeply was about to be shaken by forces neither of them had learned how to handle. At that moment in her life, love was not a risk. It was home. And that made what came next even harder to survive. Success did not arrive quietly. It came fast, loud, and demanding. One deal turned into 3. One late night became a pattern. His name started showing up in places it never had before. Meetings replaced dinners. Calls interrupted conversations. The man who once listened now spoke over everyone else. Power changed the rhythm of the house. At first, Elena told herself it was temporary. A growth phase. A grind. Everyone talked about the hustle like it was a badge of honor. She stayed patient. She stayed supportive. She reminded herself that this was the dream they had talked about on that old couch. But something shifted. He stopped asking her opinion. Decisions were already made by the time she heard about them. When she spoke, he nodded without really listening. When she waited up for him, he barely noticed. Success had given him confidence, but it had also given him distance. And distance has a way of growing when no one names it. His tone changed. Not cruel. Just colder. Conversations became transactional. Everything was about timing, optics, image. He started dressing differently, speaking differently, moving like the room owed him attention. Friends noticed it. She felt it. The warmth was fading. Elena tried to adapt. She adjusted her expectations. She told herself this was what ambition looked like up close. She told herself love meant understanding when priorities shifted. Still, there were moments that stung. Cancelled plans. Forgotten dates. A phone that mattered more than the person sitting across from him. When she mentioned it, he brushed it off. "You are overthinking," he said once without even looking up. That was new. The man who once reassured her now dismissed her. The man who once needed her now acted like he had outgrown the need. Success had not made him evil. It had made him indifferent, and that hurt more. Power does that sometimes. It convinces people they earned everything on their own. It rewrites history. It turns shared sacrifice into a solo victory lap. Slowly, without announcing itself, it changes how respect is given. Elena felt herself shrinking in spaces where she once belonged. She started choosing silence because speaking felt pointless. She started questioning herself, wondering when she became the problem in a life she helped build. This was not a blow-up. Not a dramatic fight. It was erosion. Love did not disappear overnight. It thinned. It cooled. It became something fragile that required effort from only one side. And that imbalance sat heavy in the room. Unspoken but impossible to ignore. Success gave him power. And power, unchecked, quietly pulled him away from the woman who stood beside him before it ever mattered. What entered next would take advantage of that distance. And it would not be subtle. She did not arrive quietly. She entered his world the way confidence often does, without asking for permission. Her name was mentioned casually at first, slipped into conversations like it meant nothing. An assistant. A consultant. Someone helping with scheduling. Elena heard it and moved on. She trusted her marriage more than rumors. That trust would not last. The other woman carried herself differently. Sharp posture. Direct eye contact. A voice that never hesitated. She dressed like someone who expected to be noticed and moved like the room belonged to her. People made space when she walked through it and she noticed every time. Entitlement has a look. And she wore it well. She laughed a little too loudly at his jokes. She stood a little too close during conversations. Her messages never waited for office hours. Nothing was overt. Nothing that could be confronted easily. But everything felt intentional. Elena noticed the shift before she understood it. Her husband mentioned the other woman more often. Praised her efficiency. Admired her fearlessness. Compared without meaning to compare. The admiration carried a tone Elena had not heard directed at her in a long time. The disrespect started small. A glance that lingered too long. A meeting that ran late for no clear reason. A dismissive smile when Elena entered a room unexpectedly. The other woman never acknowledged Elena directly. She did not need to. Her confidence did the talking. She behaved like someone already certain of her place, as if boundaries were suggestions rather than lines. In public she was polished, professional, almost charming. In private moments the subtle digs surfaced. A comment about Elena's quiet nature. A joke about being old-fashioned. A smirk when Elena deferred to her husband out of habit. The message was clear without being spoken. I belong here now. What made it worse was how easily he accepted it. He did not shut it down. He did not correct the tone. He let it happen because it flattered him. Because attention from someone fearless felt different from loyalty offered quietly. Confidence can be intoxicating. The other woman knew exactly what she was doing. She positioned herself as indispensable. She spoke his language, results, ambition, momentum. She mirrored the version of him that success had created, not the man Elena married. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, she took up space that was never hers. Elena felt it in the way conversations ended abruptly when she walked in. In the way her husband's focus shifted away from home. In the way decisions were made without her input, then justified afterward. This was not an affair yet. It was a takeover. The other woman did not rush. She did not need to. Confidence like hers plays the long game. She waited for distance to widen, for silence to become habit, for neglect to feel normal. And when the moment came, she would not hesitate. Elena did not know it then, but this was the point where the balance tipped. Nothing that followed would be accidental. What happened inside the house never made headlines. There were no witnesses, no cameras, no applause. Just four walls and a silence that grew heavier every day. The disrespect did not arrive all at once. It crept in slowly, wrapped in sarcasm and dismissive tones that were easy to excuse at first. That was how it started. Comments disguised as jokes. Questions that sounded more like commands. Corrections delivered in front of others, then brushed off with a casual smile. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. Power had taught him that control does not always announce itself. At home, Elena learned to measure her words. He corrected how she spoke, how she dressed, how she moved through rooms that once felt shared. If dinner was late, it was her fault. If his day went badly, her silence was suddenly annoying. If she tried to explain herself, he accused her of being dramatic. The imbalance was clear, even if no one named it. Money changed the rules. He paid for everything now, or at least that was the story he told himself. The home became his territory. Decisions were his by default. Elena was expected to adapt without complaint, grateful for the lifestyle even as her presence felt smaller each day. The other woman made herself comfortable in those spaces. She showed up unannounced. She took calls at odd hours. She laughed too freely, spoke too boldly, and never once acknowledged that she was crossing lines. When Elena objected, she was told to relax, to stop reading into things, to trust him. That trust was used against her. Behind closed doors, the insults sharpened, not shouted, delivered calmly like facts. He questioned her usefulness, her relevance, her place in his life. He compared her to the energy and drive he claimed to see elsewhere, never mentioning names, never needing to. The message landed anyway. Elena found herself apologizing for things she did not do, explaining feelings that were dismissed the moment they were spoken. She started choosing quiet over conflict because conflict always ended the same way, with her backing down. Power imbalance does not need bruises to leave marks. It shows up in posture, in hesitation, in the way someone stops believing their voice matters. Elena felt it every time she waited for permission in her own home. What hurt most was the shift in how he looked at her. Not with anger, not with hatred, with indifference. The woman who had supported him before success was now treated like background noise. Useful when convenient, ignored when not. The house was full, yet she had never felt more alone. This humiliation was private, but it was constant. It reshaped her days. It chipped away at the woman she used to be, replacing confidence with caution. And while the world outside still saw a perfect life, inside those walls something dangerous was forming. Resentment. And resentment, once planted, does not disappear quietly. It waits. And it grows. The moment did not arrive with shouting. It arrived with clarity. They were hosting a small gathering. Nothing official. Just people who mattered to his world now. Investors. Colleagues. The kind of guests who smiled politely while quietly measuring worth. Elena moved through the room out of habit, refilling glasses, listening more than she spoke. She caught pieces of conversation that were not meant for her. Then she heard her name. He said it casually without malice, which somehow made it worse. He laughed lightly and waved a hand in her direction while explaining that she did not really understand the business side of things anymore. That she preferred simpler concerns. That she liked staying out of the way. The room laughed with him. Not cruelly. Comfortably. The other woman stood beside him, smiling, perfectly at ease, as if the comment had confirmed something she already believed. She added a remark of her own, subtle but sharp, about how it must be nice to have someone who handles the home, while real decisions get made elsewhere. No one objected. Elena felt the shift immediately. Something inside her went quiet. The embarrassment came and passed quickly, replaced by something colder. Something steadier. She did not interrupt. She did not defend herself. She simply stood there, watching the version of her marriage being rewritten out loud. That was the breaking point. Not because of what was said, but because of who said it and how easily it was accepted. He did not glance at her afterward, did not check if she was all right. He moved on, confident, comfortable, certain. For the first time, Elena did not make excuses for him. She did not tell herself he was tired. She did not blame stress or ambition. She saw the truth clearly without soft edges. Respect had left the room long before she realized it. The internal shift was subtle but permanent. She stopped shrinking. She stopped waiting. She started observing. Elena watched how conversations flowed when she stayed silent. She noticed how decisions were made without her. She recognized patterns she had ignored for too long. This was no longer about misunderstandings. It was about position. And her position had been reduced without her consent. That night she did not cry. She did not confront him. She went to bed with a calm that surprised her. The kind of calm that appears when denial finally collapses. She understood something important. This was not a phase. This was the truth. And once you see the truth, you cannot unsee it. What followed would not be impulsive. It would be deliberate. The woman who believed patience solved everything was gone. In her place stood someone quietly preparing for what came next. The word did not come during a fight. It came during breakfast. He said it calmly, like he was discussing a schedule change. Divorce. No warning. No build-up. Just a statement delivered with the confidence of someone who believed the outcome was already decided. Elena looked at him, waiting for context that never arrived. He slid a folder across the table. Inside were documents she recognized instantly. Legal language. Cold formatting. A prenuptial agreement she had signed years ago. Back when trust felt permanent and protection felt unnecessary. He reminded her of that too. Casually. As if it were a clever move he had planned all along. This makes things simple, he said. Simple for him. The threats were not loud. They did not need to be. He explained what she would lose with the same tone he used to explain business terms. No shared assets. No support. No claim to the life she had helped build. The house was his. The accounts were his. Even the timeline was his to control. He gave her a deadline. Pack quickly. Take only what you need. Anything else would be handled. The other woman was present, leaning against the doorway, watching with thinly veiled satisfaction. She did not speak at first. She did not have to. Her presence said enough. This was not just a separation. It was a replacement. When Elena asked where she was supposed to go, he shrugged. You will figure it out, he said. You always do. That was abandonment dressed up as confidence. He framed it like a favor. Like he was being generous by keeping things clean. He told her lawyers were expensive. That fighting would be pointless. That dragging it out would only make things worse for her. The message was clear. Accept this quietly or lose more. The power imbalance became undeniable. He had the resources. The control. The narrative. She had nothing but the truth, and in his world truth mattered less than leverage. Elena felt the weight of it settle in her chest. Not panic. Not fear. Resolve. She realized then that the divorce was not about ending a marriage. It was about erasing her role in his story, reducing her to a footnote he could discard without consequence. He stood up, already done with the conversation. The other woman smiled, just slightly, as if to confirm what Elena already knew. This was never meant to be fair. It was meant to be final. But what he failed to understand was this. Weapons cut both ways. And by turning the law into a threat, he had unknowingly stepped onto ground he did not control. The expulsion was real. The abandonment was deliberate. Yet the silence Elena carried with her as she left the room was not defeat. It was preparation. Because when power is misused, it invites a response. And this story was far from over. The rain started just as she reached the door. Not a gentle drizzle. A heavy, soaking downpour that blurred the driveway and turned the world outside into streaks of gray. Elena stood there for a second, suitcase in hand, listening to the sound of it hitting the glass. Felt fitting. Like the universe had chosen the right mood. She did not rush. She walked through the house one last time. Not searching for memories, not lingering. Just observing. The walls looked the same. The furniture was untouched. Yet everything felt unfamiliar. As if the space had already erased her presence. She packed lightly. 2 suitcases. That was all. Clothes she had bought herself. A few books. Practical things. She left behind the jewelry. The expensive coats. Anything that felt like it belonged to a version of her life that was already gone. In the bedroom she paused. On the dresser sat a small framed photograph. Her mother. Taken years ago, before illness softened her smile. Elena picked it up carefully, running her thumb along the edge of the frame. This she decided mattered. This was not negotiable. She tucked it into her bag. Behind her, the house remained quiet. No footsteps. No goodbye. No hesitation. He did not come to see her off. He did not need to. In his mind, this chapter was already closed. The door opened with a familiar creak. Cold rain hit her face immediately, soaking through her coat within seconds. She stepped outside without flinching. The driveway stretched ahead of her, long and empty. No car waited. No driver. He had made sure of that. Elena adjusted her grip on the suitcase and started walking. Each step felt deliberate. Measured. The rain plastered her hair to her face, but she did not stop to fix it. She did not look back. The house behind her stood tall and silent, full of things she once believed were permanent. She felt the pain, but it did not control her. It sat quietly in her chest, steady and contained. Not sharp. Not chaotic. Just present. The kind of pain that does not demand attention but refuses to be ignored. By the time she reached the end of the drive, her clothes were heavy with water. Her hands ached. Her breath came slower. Still, her posture did not change. Walking away with nothing teaches you something powerful. It shows you what cannot be taken. Her dignity was intact. Her clarity was sharp. And as the rain continued to fall, Elena understood that this was not the moment she was losing everything. This was the moment she stopped being owned by it. What waited ahead was uncertain. But uncertainty, she realized, was better than a life built on silence and control. And somewhere beyond the rain, a line was about to be crossed. Not by her. By them. She walked until the road narrowed and the lights faded. Rain soaked through her clothes, clung to her skin, and weighed down the suitcase until every step required intention. Elena stopped beneath a dim street lamp, water dripping from her hair. Her hands trembling not from fear, but from exhaustion. That was when she reached into her pocket. The phone was old. Scratched. Basic. Not the one he monitored. Not the one connected to accounts or calendars or control. She had kept it hidden for years, more out of instinct than planning. Something about it had always felt necessary. She stared at the screen for a long moment. One name. She had not called it in years. Not because of distance, but because pride can be stubborn, and independence can feel like a shield. She had wanted to prove she could handle her life on her own. That she did not need rescue. That she had chosen this path and could walk it without help. Tonight changed that. Elena pressed the call button. It rang once. Then twice. On the third ring, a voice answered. Low. Controlled. Familiar in a way that settled something deep in her chest. Elena. She did not speak right away. The sound of her name cracked something open. Her breath caught, but she steadied herself. She refused to cry. Not yet. I am outside, she said quietly. I needed to hear your voice. There was a pause on the other end. Not confusion. Not hesitation. Just focus. Where are you? He asked. She gave the location. Simple. Direct. She did not explain everything. She did not need to. He listened without interrupting, without asking for details that could wait. When she finished, the rain felt louder. Another pause followed, heavier this time. Then his tone changed. Still calm. Still controlled. But sharper. Purposeful. Do not move, he said. I am sending someone. Elena closed her eyes. She did not ask questions. She did not protest. For the first time that night, she allowed herself to lean on someone else's certainty. The authority in his voice carried weight, the kind that did not need to announce itself. I am sorry, she said softly. You do not need to be, he replied. You did not do anything wrong. Those words landed harder than she expected. The call ended without drama. No promises. No threats. Just action set into motion. As she waited beneath the flickering streetlight, Elena felt something shift. The cold did not feel as sharp. The rain did not feel as heavy. She was still standing in the same place, soaked and alone, but the ground beneath her felt different. Not because someone was coming, because someone had heard her. What she did not know yet was how far that call would travel, how many doors it would open, how many assumptions it would destroy. She had reached out for help, expecting shelter. What she had activated was far more powerful. And the people who thought they had pushed her out of the game had no idea that the rules were about to change. Quietly. Decisively. In their absence. The courthouse steps looked nothing like the place Elena remembered from television. They were crowded. Loud. Alive with flashing cameras and raised voices. Reporters lined the barriers shoulder to shoulder, calling out names, chasing reactions, hungry for spectacle. This was not just a legal proceeding. It was a public event and everyone knew it. A black luxury car pulled up first. The doors opened smoothly, and he stepped out like he owned the day. Tailored suit, polished shoes, perfect posture. The millionaire husband paused just long enough for the cameras to catch his best angle. He smiled, relaxed, confident, the kind of smile that said he had nothing to worry about. Beside him, the other woman appeared effortlessly composed. Designer coat. Sunglasses large enough to hide her eyes. She held onto his arm as if it were already hers, moving with the assurance of someone who believed the future had been settled. They waved. They nodded. They performed. Questions flew toward them, and he answered a few with ease. Calm statements. Neutral language. He spoke about fairness, closure, and trust in the system. The other woman laughed softly at his side, perfectly cast in her role. Power likes an audience. Moments later, a taxi stopped at the curb. No cameras turned at first. Elena stepped out alone. No entourage. No legal team flanking her. No performance. She wore a simple suit, clean and understated. Her hair was pulled back neatly. She carried a single briefcase and nothing else. When she looked up, the noise seemed to soften just slightly, as if the contrast itself demanded attention. Reporters noticed. Whispers followed. Where was her lawyer? Was she really doing this alone? Elena did not rush. She did not slow down. She walked with steady steps toward the entrance, her expression calm, unreadable. She did not look at the cameras. She did not look at him. Inside the courtroom, the divide became even clearer. He took his seat surrounded by attorneys. Documents spread across the table like armor. They whispered strategies. They exchanged confident glances. The other woman sat close, comfortable, scanning the room with curiosity rather than concern. Elena sat alone at the opposite table. She placed her briefcase down carefully. She removed a notepad. She set a pen beside it. That was all. No show. No excess. Just preparation. Someone in the gallery laughed quietly. The contrast was impossible to ignore. One side looked powerful. The other looked unprotected. That was the assumption. What no one understood was how misleading appearances can be. Power does not always announce itself with numbers and noise. Sometimes it waits. Sometimes it watches. The room filled quickly. Every seat was taken. The air buzzed with expectation. People leaned forward, sensing that something mattered here, even if they could not yet explain why. Elena kept her eyes on the empty bench. She did not glance at her husband. She did not acknowledge the other woman. Her focus remained forward, steady, as if she were waiting for something specific. The bailiff stepped forward. "All rise." The room stood. As the judge entered, conversations died instantly. The energy shifted. Elena felt it before she saw him fully. A presence that did not need volume to command attention. The game was about to begin. And for the first time that morning, the confidence on the other side wavered, just enough to be noticed. Because power, real power, had just entered the room. And it was not where they expected it to be. The oath was administered quickly. Right hand raised. Voice steady. He swore to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. The words rolled off his tongue without resistance, as if they were routine. For someone used to controlling narratives, this was just another stage. He took the stand with confidence. He spoke clearly, calmly. He described the marriage as strained. He painted himself as patient, reasonable, generous. He talked about providing stability, opportunity, and comfort. He explained that Elena had chosen a quieter life, that she had stepped back willingly, that everything had been mutual. The lies were clean, not reckless, not emotional, strategic. He framed neglect as distance, control as structure, indifference as misunderstanding. Each sentence was crafted to sound balanced, measured, and fair. His lawyers nodded along. The gallery listened carefully. Some even believed him. Elena watched without reacting. She kept her posture still, her pen untouched. She did not interrupt. She did not roll her eyes. She had learned something important over the years. People like him counted on reactions. They thrived on disruption. She gave him none. The other woman followed. She took the stand with a practiced confidence that bordered on arrogance. She smiled at the judge. She spoke about professionalism, about boundaries, about being misunderstood. She claimed she had always respected the marriage, that any closeness had been misinterpreted. Her voice softened at the right moments. She spoke about concern, about discomfort, about fear. Fear of Elena. It was a bold move, a power play designed to flip sympathy. She suggested instability without saying the word. She implied jealousy without naming it. She described Elena as distant, withdrawn, unpredictable. Psychological pressure filled the room. Elena felt it pressing in from all sides. Eyes turned toward her. Whispers rippled through the gallery. The story being told did not match the life she had lived, but it was convincing enough to create doubt. Doubt was the goal. The judge listened without expression. No nods. No interruptions. He asked a few questions, precise and unemotional. Dates. Timelines. Clarifications. Each answer was recorded. Each inconsistency noted, though no one could tell. The tension climbed quietly. This was not a shouting match. It was a chess game played in public. Every word mattered. Every pause carried weight. Elena felt the pressure to speak, to defend herself, to correct the record. She stayed silent. Not because she was weak, because she was prepared. When it was her turn to speak, she stood slowly. She did not rush. She did not dramatize. She stated facts. Simple. Clear. She did not accuse. She did not exaggerate. She spoke only about what she could prove. Her restraint unsettled them. The room leaned in. Something about her calm cut through the noise. It created a different kind of tension, the kind that makes people uncomfortable because it suggests there is more coming. The judge looked down at his notes again. Longer this time. The lies had been spoken. The stage had been set. What followed would not depend on emotion or volume. It would depend on truth. And truth, once introduced, has a way of rearranging power very quickly. The next moment would decide whose story survived the light. And someone in that room was about to realize that confidence without evidence is a risky bet. The tension in the courtroom had settled into something heavy. Not loud. Not chaotic. Uncomfortable. The judge called for a short recess. People stood, stretching stiff legs, whispering behind hands. The lawyers clustered together, confident smiles returning. The gallery buzzed softly, hungry for reaction. Elena remained seated. She gathered her papers slowly, her movements controlled, precise. As she stood to step aside, she passed the opposing table without looking up. That was when it happened. The other woman leaned back in her chair and laughed. Not quietly, not politely. A sharp, dismissive laugh that cut through the room. She muttered something under her breath, loud enough to be heard by those closest. A comment about desperation, about cheap suits, about knowing when to leave a room. It was meant to sting, meant to provoke, meant to remind Elena of her place. Elena did not respond. That was not what triggered it. As Elena moved past, the other woman shifted deliberately. A calculated movement. A foot extending just enough. A deliberate step disguised as carelessness. Elena's balance faltered as the contact landed, sudden and unmistakable. She stumbled. The sound of her briefcase hitting the floor echoed sharply as papers spilled across the aisle. Elena dropped to one knee, catching herself before falling completely. The silence that followed was instant and absolute. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Someone whispered, "Did she just?" The other woman stepped back, hands raised, a practiced expression of innocence sliding into place. "Oh my God," she said lightly. "She should really watch where she is going." A few nervous laughs followed. Not many. The millionaire husband smirked. Just for a second. Long enough. That smirk said everything. Elena remained still for a moment, one hand pressed against the floor, the other steadying herself. She did not cry out. She did not lash out. She stood slowly, gathering her papers with shaking fingers that betrayed nothing except restraint. Every eye in the room was on her. The humiliation was complete. Public. Deliberate. Unavoidable. The judge's chair scraped softly as he shifted. No one spoke. Not the lawyers. Not the bailiff. Not the judge. Yet, the air felt different now. Charged. Tight. The kind of silence that signals something irreversible has just occurred. The other woman returned to her seat, smoothing her jacket, confident she had crossed the line without consequence. That confidence would not last. Elena placed her papers back into her briefcase. She straightened her jacket. She lifted her chin. When she turned, her eyes did not seek sympathy. They held certainty. Because some actions cannot be explained away. Some moments cannot be undone. And some lines once crossed in public demand a response. The courtroom did not know it yet. But everything had just changed. The title moment had arrived. And the reckoning was no longer optional. The silence did not break on its own. It was shattered. The judge's gavel came down once, hard, sharp, final. The sound echoed through the courtroom like a warning shot. Every head snapped toward the bench. Conversations died instantly. Even the air felt like it had stopped moving. Enough. His voice was calm, but there was something underneath it now. Something etched. Something personal. He stood. That alone shifted the room. Judges did not usually stand like this. Not mid-proceeding. Not without reason. The bailiff straightened instinctively. The lawyers froze. The confidence at the opposing table drained in real time. The judge's eyes locked onto the other woman. "You assaulted a litigant in my courtroom," he said evenly. In full view of the bench. The other woman laughed nervously, waving a hand. "It was an accident." She tripped. The judge did not blink. "I saw it," he said. "Every second of it." A ripple of unease spread through the room. The millionaire husband leaned forward, irritation creeping into his expression. "Your Honor, with respect, emotions are running high. This is unnecessary." That was his mistake. The judge turned his gaze slowly, deliberately, and fixed it on him. "Sit down," he said. 2 words. Absolute authority. The husband hesitated. Just for a fraction of a second. Long enough for everyone to notice. Then he sat. The judge exhaled, controlled, measured. When he spoke again, his voice carried a weight that had not been there before. "You have been very comfortable in this courtroom," he said. "Very confident. Very careless." He paused, then looked directly at Elena. For the first time his expression changed. Not soft, Not weak. Human. Elena, he said. Her name landed like a dropped glass. The gallery stirred. Heads turned. Whispers sparked instantly. The judge straightened. For the record, he continued, I will clarify something that seems to have been misunderstood. He placed both hands on the bench. My name is Arthur. The room went still. Arthur Vance, he said clearly. And the woman you just humiliated is my daughter. Shock hit the room in waves. A gasp. Then another. The other woman's face drained of color. Her mouth opened but no sound came out. The husband stared, frozen, his confidence collapsing under the weight of realization. The power in the room shifted violently. This was no longer a game of money and influence. This was not a man they could intimidate, dismiss, or outmaneuver. This was authority with history. Authority with limits. The judge's voice remained steady. You did not know, he said. You did not bother to ask. He looked at Elena again, pride flickering briefly before control returned. This court will proceed, he said. And it will proceed properly. The gavel came down again. What they thought was protection had vanished. What they thought was power had been exposed. And for the first time that day, the people who walked in confident understood something terrifying. They were no longer in control of the outcome. Not even close. The courtroom did not erupt. It tightened. Shock settled into something heavier as the reality of the revelation sank in. The confidence that once filled the opposing table drained away, replaced by shallow breaths and darting glances. Power had shifted, not loudly but completely. The judge resumed his seat. Calm returned to his posture, but the tone of the room had changed beyond repair. This was no longer a performance. This was procedure. And procedure, when followed properly, leaves very little room to hide. We will continue, he said evenly. The lawyers scrambled. Arguments that once sounded sharp now felt rushed. Objections came late. Confidence cracked under pressure. The judge listened patiently, but his questions grew more precise. Dates were revisited. Statements were cross-checked. Contradictions surfaced quietly, one after another. The lies began to collapse under their own weight. The prenuptial agreement was examined closely. Clauses read aloud. One section, previously brushed aside, was suddenly unavoidable. Infidelity, abuse, breach of conduct. The words hung in the air, heavy and exact. The other woman shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Evidence was introduced. Messages, timelines, financial records that painted a very different picture from the one presented earlier. Payments that did not align. Assets that had been moved quietly. Benefits gained during the marriage that were now being denied. The narrative unraveled. What had been framed as generosity was exposed as control. What had been called independence was revealed as exclusion. The attempt to erase Elena's contribution failed under documentation she never needed to dramatize. The judge did not raise his voice. He did not need to. His rulings came clean and direct. The prenuptial agreement was rendered unenforceable, due to violations that had been clearly established. Asset division was recalculated. Ownership reconsidered. Protections applied where they should have existed all along. The millionaire husband's expression shifted from disbelief to panic. This was not the outcome he had planned for. Financial consequences followed swiftly. Accounts frozen pending review. Transfers reversed. Penalties assessed for misrepresentation. What he had assumed was untouchable was now under scrutiny line by line. Reputation followed money. The press, once eager to celebrate his confidence, turned hungry. Questions sharpened. Headlines rewrote themselves in real time. The image he had curated cracked publicly, and cracks spread fast. The other woman attempted to distance herself. It did not work. Her behavior in court was noted. Her testimony reevaluated. Her role no longer felt invisible. She shrank into her chair as attention turned toward her with less curiosity and more judgment. Elena said very little. She did not need to speak. Justice does not require spectacle when facts are enough. The ruling concluded with clarity. Rights restored. Dignity acknowledged. Consequences applied without cruelty, but without mercy either. This was not revenge driven by rage. This was accountability delivered properly. Clean. Smart. Final. As the gavel came down for the last time, the room exhaled. The people who walked in believing they controlled the system left understanding something far more humbling. Influence fades. Money moves. But truth, when protected by the right authority, holds its ground. Elena gathered her belongings calmly. She did not look back at them. She did not need closure from people who had already lost everything that made them powerful. Justice had spoken. And karma, patient and precise, had done exactly what it always does. It arrived right on time. The courthouse doors closed behind her with a heavy final sound. For a moment Elena stood still, breathing in air that felt different from the air inside. Lighter. Clearer. The chaos of voices and cameras faded behind her, replaced by a quiet she had not felt in years. She had won. Not in the loud celebratory way people imagine. Not with raised arms or tears of relief. She won in a way that mattered more. She walked out with her dignity intact and her sense of self returned. Outside, the city moved on. Cars passed. People hurried by. Life continued, indifferent to the drama that had unfolded inside those walls. And somehow that normalcy felt grounding, comforting. It reminded her that this moment, as powerful as it was, did not define her entire existence. The pain had not vanished. It had changed. It no longer sat in her chest like a weight. It rested behind her, a memory rather than a wound. What replaced it was clarity, the kind that comes from surviving something you once believed would break you. She understood now what strength actually looked like. Not control. Not dominance. Resilience. Elena did not feel the need to prove anything. She did not feel the urge to explain herself to the world. The verdict had already done that for her. Her life was no longer up for debate. She thought about the woman she used to be. The one who believed patience was enough. The one who stayed quiet to keep peace. That woman was not weak. She was hopeful. But she had outgrown the need to sacrifice herself for someone else's comfort. Power, she realized, did not come from money or influence. It came from knowing when to walk away. As she stepped into the car waiting at the curb, she felt a calm certainty settle in. The future was open again. Not predictable. Not safe in the way it once seemed. But honest. And honesty was freedom. Elena looked ahead, not back. She did not carry bitterness with her. She carried lessons. Boundaries. A deeper respect for herself. The past had taken enough. It did not get to follow her forward. Walking away stronger did not mean forgetting what happened. It meant refusing to let it define her. She had reclaimed her voice, her space, her life. And for the first time in a long time, the road ahead felt like her own. Quiet, unclaimed, and full of possibility. Some stories are not about revenge. They are about restraint. This was not a woman who screamed the loudest or struck back the hardest. This was a woman who waited, observed, and chose dignity when humiliation was offered. And that choice changed everything. The real lesson here is simple. Never mistake silence for weakness. Never confuse patience with permission. Power built on disrespect always collapses eventually. It may take time, but it never escapes accountability. Elena did not win because she had influence or money. She won because she refused to lose herself. She trusted truth over noise, and when the moment came, she stood exactly where she needed to stand. That is strength. If this story kept you hooked, make sure you hit the like button. It helps the channel more than you think. And if you want more stories where justice comes clean and consequences are real, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss one. Now I want to hear from you. What would you have done in her place? Would you have confronted earlier? Or stayed quiet and waited for the right moment? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Your perspective matters.